Revenge with Karen.
There were 12 of us jammed into that corner office, glass walls smudged with whiteboard ink, cables snaking like urban kudzu across every desk, and the air always just a little too dry from the ancient HVAC duct overhead. But it was ours. Our little bunker of sanity in a company hellbent on turning itself into a circus. That room, it wasn't just where code got written, it was where trust lived. Where bad coffee, sarcasm, stubborn brilliance formed a nervous system that powered the company's golden goose, their data platform. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked into that space like a conductor stepping onto a podium, and the hum shifted. Conversations stopped. Someone muted a podcast. Fingers hovered above keyboards. She nodded once, and suddenly Jira tickets were updated, models optimized. The logs from last night's pipeline hiccup were already being dissected in a shared terminal window. That team didn't just work hard, they moved as one. 7 years of building together had turned them into something rare, efficient, loyal, and quietly lethal. The rest of the company, that was a different story. Upstairs, it was all beanbag chairs, neon slogans about crushing goals, and execs who thought machine learning was just magic Excel. C-suite loved to wheel Claire out like a Tesla prototype at town halls, clean her up, let her present a few charts, then shove her back into the engine room when the applause died down. Her work got them headlines. Their work got catered lunches and interviews in trade mags where they mangled the jargon with confident cluelessness. But Claire never played the martyr. She didn't do late nights for recognition. She did them because she knew how thin the line was between a stable system and a PR disaster. And when the codebase got ugly, or an integration failed at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, no one called the shiny VP of innovation. They called Claire, and she always answered. Most days started the same. Alex brought in a box of cheap pastries. Marisol had already been there for an hour, elbows deep in a new visualization layer for their anomaly detection module. Kenny muttered in Python under his breath like it was Latin prayer. Claire circled slowly, checking screens, nodding occasionally, pointing once in a while. No micromanagement, just a presence. When she paused by the gray housing unit near the Ethernet hub, their ugly little mystery box, as the interns called it, she'd tap it twice, lightly, like knocking wood. Nobody really understood what it did. But she did, and that was enough. Their platform had gotten good. Too good, maybe. CTO had finally stopped pretending he understood it and started parroting whatever Claire put in the summary decks. Predictive clarity, he called it, as if he'd invented the term. They were prepping for Series D round, which meant investor dogs in tailored suits sniffing around for innovation stake. Suddenly, everyone upstairs was pretending they cared about core tech infrastructure and proprietary data backbones. Claire knew the type, vultures with spreadsheets. Still, in their corner, things felt untouchable. They had uptime stats that made auditors grin. They had a bug ratio so low it felt illegal. Hell, last quarter, their internal dashboard flagged a pricing exploit in one of the company's own vendors before finance even noticed. But no one gave them the suite with a view or a spot in the demo rehearsals. Just another email from Graham, their middle managing boss with the charisma of a broken scanner, reminding them to log their hours more transparently. The irony? Claire didn't want the spotlight. She didn't want the high-five Slack emojis or the title bump. She wanted space, focus, autonomy, and her team had earned it. They'd eaten more pressure in 3 quarters than most departments did in 3 years. Half the sales team didn't even know what their platform did. One VP had once referred to it as that Excel on steroids thing. Claire just smiled, because she knew what was coming. The team, meanwhile, had developed their own culture, an unspoken code. No bullshit, no bragging, no broken promises. If someone missed a deliverable, they fessed up. If someone crushed a sprint, they quietly helped whoever was drowning next. That's what made it work, not incentives, not stock options. Each other. That Friday, Claire stayed late. The office was dark except for the glow of few monitors and the flicker of the city skyline in the window. She stood in the middle of the room, listening to the soft whir of machines, the distant laugh from marketing down the hall, and her own breath. Her eyes drifted toward the gray housing unit again. No label, no logo, just a hum. It wasn't flashy, but it was everything. She tapped it once, twice, then walked out, leaving the lights on, just this once. Let the system breathe. The weekend would be quiet. But next week, something was coming, something loud, and no one. Not Graham, not the TikTok hire, not the grinning vultures and pinstripes, was ready. They called it an all-hands, but it felt more like a talent show staged by insecure middle management. Claire sat in the back, sipping burnt coffee from a chipped mug that still had last quarter's audit sticker on the side. Her team hadn't even been invited, just her. One seat, one witness. The rest were upstairs, heads down in the annex they never left, grinding through a real-time fraud detection module that, ironically, would have flagged this meeting as a waste of resources. Graham stood at the front like a man who'd just discovered charisma in a vending machine. Let's give a warm welcome to our new head of social engagement and storytelling, Taran. He beamed, stepping aside with the flourish of someone presenting a prize goat at county fair. Taran strutted up in leggings that cost more than Claire's entire wardrobe budget, behaving like a homecoming queen. Hi, fam, she chirped into the mic. I'm so vibed to co-create with you all. Claire's eye twitched. Then Graham added, offhandedly, like it was a weather update, oh, and just a quick facilities note. Taran will be moving into the northeast corner office this week, you know, the one near the data folks. We think it'll really amplify her creative energy. Claire froze. The words slithered around her brain like cold oil. Northeast corner office. Her office. Their office. No heads turned. No one gasped. No dramatic music cue. Just a smattering of polite claps and one guy from brand strategy asking if there would be plants in the new space. Because in that room, Claire didn't matter. She was back-end, background. The lady with the graphs who never smiled and always wore the same faded gray blazer. She walked out before they brought out the cupcakes. By the time she got back downstairs, team was still hammering away. Marisol was debugging a batch job. Alex had headphones on and was furiously typing something that looked like an algorithmic slap in the face. Kenny had his usual Red Bull shrine going, 3 cans deep. No one knew. No one had been told. Claire didn't say a word. Not yet. Monday morning, a facilities specialist appeared at the door like a tax collector. He carried a clipboard and looked apologetic in that corporate way that says, "This isn't my call, but I'd happily unplug your life support if it was on this sheet." He cleared his throat and said, "There's been a reallocation of space. We're going to need you guys to start prepping for a relocation by end of week." Kenny blinked. "Relocation to where?" "Annex 2B," the man replied, "near the service entrance." Still on this floor, that space had no windows, no working AC, shared a wall with the janitor's mop closet, and had been used last quarter as overflow for broken printers and someone's defunct treadmill desk. Claire nodded, slow and robotic. "We'll comply. Please send us the final move order in writing." The man looked relieved. "Of course. Appreciate your professionalism." She shut the door in his face before he could say more. Marisol looked at her. "Wait, what's happening?" Claire took a breath. "We've been evicted." Silence. Alex let out a low, stunned "what the hell?" And Kenny dropped his Red Bull. Claire raised a hand. "We're going to pack. We're going to move, and we're going to take everything. Every router, every adapter, every whiteboard marker. And we're going to do it neatly, without complaint." The team exchanged glances, anger simmering, confusion thick, but no one argued. Claire had never steered them wrong. If she said pack, they packed. Upstairs, Taran posted an Instagram reel from her new content sanctuary. It featured a ring light, 3 succulents, and a caption that said, "Manifesting synergy and sparkle sparkles, #Vibe Squad." Meanwhile, Claire stood in the corner of their now-condemned war room, staring at the Ethernet panel like it owed her an apology. Her hand hovered briefly over the gray housing unit. She tapped it once. She didn't explain it to them. Not yet. Not when they were still reeling from the slap. Not when they were too humiliated to realize the tide was already shifting under their feet. Because here's the thing, Claire had warned them. She told Graham months ago that the core handshake for their visualization system had been designed for internal authentication. No cloud fallback, no remote key pair access. It was secure by design because investors liked secure. And it lived in one place, hardwired, unreplicated. In that room, in that port, they hadn't listened. No one ever did, not until it was too late. Now she smiled the way people do when they see lightning on a clear day. Numb, quiet, but charged, they could take her office. But they had no idea what else they'd just unplugged. The silence in the room wasn't just awkward, it was surgical. It cut through caffeine jitters, keyboard clacks, even the low groan of the HVAC above. Claire stood by the door, shadow stretching across the tangled cords and half-emptied snack drawers like a clock's final hand. She didn't frown, didn't blink. Just calmly said, "Pack everything." Marisol looked up from her dual monitors, confused. "Everything, everything?" "Yes," Claire said. Even the extension cords. Even the backup dongles we swore we'd never use. Kenny pulled his headphones off slowly, as if volume might have distorted what he just heard. Are we being shut down? Claire shook her head. No, we're complying. It was that word, complying, that made the room stiller than it already was. Claire never used corporate verbs unless she meant something underneath them. Alex opened a drawer with shaking fingers. Are we losing funding? Did something break? No, she said. They just need the space for someone who hashtags better than we code. No one laughed. Not even Kenny, whose gallows humor had carried them through 3 missed payrolls and 1 flood. She moved across the room with the precision of someone clearing a crime scene, not an office. Her fingertips hovered over routers, servers, switchboards. She tapped a stack of redundant drives with their labeled edges worn to illegibility. This bin goes in my car, she said. Marisol squinted. Should we request facility transport? Claire shook her head again. No paper trail. It wasn't paranoia. Not exactly. It was policy, Claire style, low profile, high control. He picked up a roll of tape and scribbled "Don't drop" across the top of a battered Pelican case, then added a sharp red dot to the side. No label, no signature. Just a mark her team had learned meant fragile, expensive, possibly illegal to mishandle. Then she paused, stared at the wall, that gray housing unit. It sat half-hidden behind the switchboard, wedged between a dead Wi-Fi booster and a box of prototype sensors from 2 reorgs ago. To most eyes, looked like e-waste, slightly dented, one cable always blinking amber, another zip-tied to a duct like it was afraid to run. It had no markings, no model number. Claire had installed it herself 5 years ago. No one ever asked what it did, so no one ever understood why she always tapped it twice before leaving for the night. She crouched, unplugged it cleanly, and stood without ceremony. Kenny, I want you to take this. Don't let it out of your sight. Kenny blinked. Oh, what is it? It's ours, she said simply. He nodded and took it like a soldier being handed a sealed order. No one questioned her, not because they understood, but because they knew her silence was rarely empty. Claire didn't act unless she'd already gamed out 5 scenarios and 2 contingency plans. When she said pack, it wasn't defeat. It was movement, a shift in phase. By midday, the office looked like a busted ribcage. Wires dangling like tendons, chairs overturned, one lonely mug left behind with "World's Okayest Data Scientist" scrawled in Sharpie. Claire took a photo of the space before locking the door, just one. Not sentimental, just documentation. They wheeled their stuff past marketing, who barely looked up from their brainstorming session about launching a TikTok for the company's brand soul. Taryn was in the corner, snapping selfies next to a Himalayan salt lamp someone had already installed in their old office. She waved with fake warmth when she saw Claire pass. Hey girl, hope you don't mind. We're going to do a wall of mood boards over your old whiteboard. It's all about manifestation energy. Claire didn't break stride. The annex smelled like bleach and frustration. It was barely wide enough for 2 desks across, and one of the lights buzzed like it had a death wish. A cart of unused soap dispensers sat in the corner like some absurdist installation art. Still, Claire nodded. Okay, this is home now. They unpacked in silence. Set up monitors, ran cable through floor gaps. Kenny placed the gray box under his desk like a pet waiting for a signal. Marisol stacked 2 crates to make a standing desk. Alex repinned the sticky note that read "Trust the math, not the suits." Claire stood near the door, arms crossed, watching her team rebuild their cockpit with the same careful energy they used to write code. Not fast, not flashy, correct. She checked her watch. In 15 minutes, Graham would be doing a pre-demo walkthrough with the Series D liaisons in their old office, with the assumption that all systems were plug-and-play, turnkey, idiot-proof. Claire smiled faintly. Let them believe that. For now. Graham strutted through the halls like he'd personally reinvented Synergy. Started wearing tighter shirts, like the praise from the board gave him permission to rediscover his triceps. Every sentence ended in a buzzword. Taryn's influence is already transformative, he said in one meeting, as if she'd done anything more than dim the overhead lights and install a vision board labeled "Content is Queen." And the photos. God, the photos. Taryn flooded the company Slack with them. New Creative Haven became a recurring post on the Hash Culture channel. Her cross-legged on Claire's old desk, sipping matcha from a mug that said "Slay First," then "Sync," framed by string lights and a fake plant wall. Every shot was hashtagged like a middle manager's fever dream. Hash grind in glitter hash data, but make it fashion hash my office smells like Ambition Claire's old whiteboard, once covered in model architectures and real-time error graphs, now featured post-its that said things like influence equals income and viral vital. No one said anything. No one had to. The engineers from other teams averted their eyes when passing the annex. It was like watching a surgeon get demoted to mall security. The annex itself was its own insult. Their desks were jammed in so tight that when Marisol leaned back, her chair knocked over a mop bucket. The Wi-Fi dropped every 20 minutes, probably thanks to a busted signal repeater wedged behind the vending machine. Every time someone from facilities rolled past with a squeaky supply cart, they had to pause Zoom meetings and pretend it wasn't happening. Claire once gave a walkthrough to a third-party auditor while a janitor changed an air filter 3 feet away from her keyboard. But she never snapped. Not once. Instead, Claire got quiet. Not the kind of quiet that's meek, kind that builds pressure in the floorboards. She started working odd hours, took longer walks, left the office with a canvas tote bag instead of her usual laptop case. When people asked where she was going, she just said, meeting. With who? She didn't say. The team noticed, of course. Marisol caught her one afternoon in the lobby, chatting with someone in a cobalt suit. Looked like VC or maybe legal. The guy handed Claire a folder, said something with a tight smile, vanished like mist. Claire didn't offer an explanation, just walked back in and helped Kenny refactor an outdated query like nothing had happened. Alex whispered later, "You think she's job hunting?" Marisol replied, "She's always doing something. The question is when she'll let us in on it." Meanwhile, Graham was busy pretending he was now a thought leader. He updated his LinkedIn with a new banner that read "Driving Disruption" through people-centric vision. He started tagging Claire's work as legacy architecture in slide decks, implying it was noble but outdated, like a steam engine they kept around for sentimental reasons. Then came the internal email blast, a subject line that read, "From backend to bright lights. A new chapter in our creative evolution." It was pure ego syrup. He praised Taryn's brand-first instincts, claimed her presence had already improved team morale, said the relocation of back-office functions had opened up an exciting new cultural dimension to our physical workspace. Claire read it twice, didn't react. She forwarded it to herself, then deleted it, and every time the Wi-Fi dropped or someone spilled bleach near the extension cords, or the team had to reboot their systems after a janitor unplugged the router to charge a floor polisher, she just took a breath and said, "Log it." Every inconvenience, every stumble, every time a dashboard stalled or a packet got dropped. Claire logged it with a timestamp and a screenshot. She created a folder named Reallocation Impact Notes and stored it offline. Her own little time bomb. She still responded to Graham's emails with polite efficiency. Still joined meetings with her camera on, hair tied back, voice even. But there was a crack in her tone, a kind of surgical detachment. Like she was watching her own ghost haunt the conference calls. Team held together, mostly. They didn't complain out loud, but they worked slower, smiled less, stopped joking on Slack. Claire told them to keep building. "Keep the system clean," she said. "We're not broken, we're just misplaced." Then one Thursday, while everyone was out grabbing lunch, Claire stayed behind. She sat alone in the annex, the only sound a dripping faucet from the adjacent janitor's closet. She opened her laptop, logged into the root node of their visualization platform, and quietly ran a trace, just to see what they'd been patching since the move, just to confirm they hadn't touched the one node she hadn't replicated. They hadn't. Of course they hadn't. Claire smiled to herself, shut the laptop, and got up. She wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. They called it Demo Day like it was a college pitch fest, but this was something else entirely. This was the golden fleece, the brass ring. "Oh God, please don't let us go broke, Hail Mary." 2 major VC firms were flying in from the coasts, and one family office so private they didn't even list their names on the NDA. The Series D pitch had been circling for weeks, bloated with buzzwords and increasingly panicked Zoom calls about positioning and traction metrics. But the centerpiece, the gleaming diamond they were going to parade in front of the money men, was Claire's platform. The data visualization suite, the one she'd built from scratch over 7 years, through 4 CEOs, 3 pivots, and 1 merger so dumb it nearly sunk the company. The one no one asked her about anymore. She first noticed it in the calendar invites. Meetings titled Q3 Demo Sync Exec Only, Investor Prep Key Voices, UI Polish Sprint Tarin, Graham External. Her name wasn't on a single one. She tried searching for her own username in the permissions logs. Results stung more than expected. Access level. View only downgraded 3 days ago. The audit trail was clean. No alerts, no emails, just gone. Like a magician had waved their hand and erased her existence with a smile. She didn't ask why. She didn't forward it to HR. She just wrote down the timestamp. Then she opened a private mirror of the deployment pipeline and began quietly tracking what they touched. It was almost poetic. Changed the color scheme, made it more brand-aligned. Adjusted fonts for readability. They moved one of the time series sliders to the left margin because Taryn thought it looked more modern. They deleted one of the real-time alert conditions entirely. Claire didn't flinch. Then they tried to install a new authentication module over the old handshake, which was like trying to jam a USB into a toaster and wondering why it didn't light up. The system ran, sure, sluggish. She could see the lag in heat maps, in cache bloat, in weird latency patterns crawling through the dev environment like mold under fresh paint. A junior engineer even flagged it in the build notes, seeing intermittent stallouts at login handshake. Might be issue with original root binding. No one responded. Claire stared at the note for a long time, sipping black coffee gone cold. She didn't reply either. Let them learn. The best part. They thought they'd removed her because of demo security. That's what Graham told someone in Slack when asked why Claire's permissions had been downgraded. We just need tight control of the demo flow. It's not personal. Claire's doing more of the, background support stuff now. Background support. Like the steel beams holding up the penthouse. Claire kept logging everything. CPU spikes, port misroutes, growing backlog of silent failures piling up in error logs no one was reading. She made copies, not because she needed them, but because they didn't know they existed. Meanwhile, Taryn kept filming reels. Her newest TikTok, a slow pan of the revamped dashboard with a voiceover. We built this from vision and vibes, so excited to show our investors how beauty meets data. Claire watched it exactly once. No rage, just a kind of dead quiet inside her chest. Marisol asked her one day, do we escalate? Go to compliance? CTO? Claire shook her head. Not yet. But they're breaking things, Alex added. Claire just said, let them. Every time Graham mentioned platform stability in a meeting, Claire would note the commit hash they'd just pushed. Every time Taryn mentioned real-time intelligence, she'd log the memory bloat spike. Every time someone said bulletproof, Claire smiled and wrote down the exact second the bullet slipped through the vest. The team started catching on. They didn't ask direct questions. They just got quieter, more deliberate. Kenny updated the admin docs with subtle sarcasm. Marisol backed up the data nodes on encrypted flash drives just because. Alex moved one of the older heatmap renderers back onto a sandbox server and marked it for testing do not delete in Comic Sans. They weren't scared. We're watching the matchstick inch closer to the fuse. Claire stayed calm, focused. She attended the internal demo run as a silent observer per Graham's label. She didn't speak, didn't flinch when the charts lagged, didn't smile when the new interface froze for 6 seconds before recovering. She just tapped a pen against her notebook. Once, twice. The sound echoed in the annex like a metronome, counting down to something nobody else heard. Almost there. Called it a dry run. But it was more like a seance. Everyone pretending to commune with a system they didn't understand, hoping the ghost of stability would float in on its own. The final investor demo rehearsal was held in the main conference room, all sleek glass and filtered water bottles, with a makeshift stage where Graham stood like a man, auditioning for TED talk no one asked for. The engineers, the ones still in good standing, shuffled in with company-issued polos and forced smiles. Claire's old team, not invited. Officially, the platform was stable. Locked, verified. That was the lie Graham kept repeating like a mantra. It's turnkey, plug-and-play, total uptime. He'd even brought in an external UI consultant to polish the front end, someone who pronounced SQL as SQL and said things like Vibescape without blinking. The dashboard shimmered under the projector, cleaned up and color-coded, purged of anything that hinted at complexity. Claire watched from her annex. Not in person, she didn't need to be. She had the logs, the memory benchmarks, the back-end pings and throughput metrics that still trickled into her private sandbox node like whispers from a dying machine. And it was dying. The latency on the data layer wasn't just growing, it was metastasizing. Not crashing, no, nothing obvious. Just a slow, creeping sludge behind every query. Used to take 300 milliseconds was now grazing 800. A casual user might not notice, but an investor with a stopwatch brain, they'd smell it. Then came the warning. Claire saw it tucked inside a buried JIRA ticket, marked low priority, flagged by a junior dev named Jonah who still triple-checked his commits and signed his comments with TA checks. Log and stallouts. Seeing some weirdness in the authentication load balancer. Looks like there's a dependency on a hardwired path we don't control. Suggest fallback route check plus local cache update. The ticket sat there, unassigned, no comments. Claire highlighted the word dependency and smiled faintly. Back in the main room, Graham rehearsed his pitch with the fervor of a man who'd already mentally spent the funding. He gestured at pie charts, over-enunciated buzzwords, and asked rhetorical questions like, what if your data could see around corners? The conviction of a cult leader. Taryn followed with a segment about emotional data resonance that made 3 engineers visibly wince. She clicked through a dashboard tab that Claire herself had built 2 years ago, now dressed up in pastel gradients and emojis, like putting a tuxedo on a chainsaw and calling it user-friendly. The platform loaded. Eventually, the graph stuttered, briefly. Graham didn't notice. Jonah did. He raised a cautious hand. Quick note. A slight delay on auth. Could be preload cache, but I think there's a routing issue we haven't patched since the environment moved. Graham waved him off. It's fine. That'll resolve with scale. Besides, Claire's code was always kind of bespoke. Claire, 3 rooms away, took a slow sip of her coffee and marked a checkbox. Heavy checkmark authentication latency confirmed. She'd made the list a week ago. Quietly, privately, spreadsheet titled Demo Dependencies Active vs Dead that only lived on a thumb drive taped beneath her desk. Every cell in it was color-coded like a countdown. Green for stable, yellow for risk, red for inevitable failure. The reds were blooming like wildfire. They hadn't touched the gray box's node. They hadn't replicated the port protocol. They hadn't listened to the kid who actually understood how load balancing worked. They had, however, added an animated loading spinner shaped like a rocket ship. Taryn's idea. Claire watched the video replay of the rehearsal 3 times. She paused it at the moment the dashboard failed to load for exactly 1.6 seconds before catching up. She zoomed in on Graham's face, just a flicker of confusion before he covered it with a joke. Guess we're keeping you in suspense, he said, pointing finger guns at the empty chairs where the investors would sit. She wrote one more note. Heavy checkmark failure will be subtle, then total. Then she opened her email, typed a single sentence to her team. Please verify your backups. No syncs for 72 hours. No signature. No subject. She closed her laptop, stood up from her annex desk, and walked down the hall to grab a tea from the machine that only made chamomile or rage. She chose rage. No sugar. As she waited for the cup to fill, a member of the sales team passed by and said, "Hey Claire, heard the big day's coming. You must be proud." She smiled, polite as ever. Very. Because pride wasn't the emotion anymore. Readiness was. It started like every corporate fever dream, glossy name tags, overpriced charcuterie, and executives vibrating in their tailored suits like wind-up toys. The conference room had been transformed overnight into what Graham called the Vision Theater, complete with branded LED uplighting and a floral arrangement shaped like the company logo. The champagne was on ice. Someone in HR had printed welcome packets on linen paper, just in case investors forgot how much money they were about to dump into a tech company whose soul had already left the building. Claire wasn't there. Of course she wasn't there. She was 3 blocks away, in a coffee shop with cracked tile and no Wi-Fi, sipping a drink that tasted vaguely like burnt almonds and peppermint regret. The barista called it a holiday cortado. Claire didn't correct her. She had her phone on Do Not Disturb, face down, but the notifications were already stacking up like nervous sweat. Back in the office, the CEO, a man who once referred to Claire as that analytics gal, stepped up to the mic and delivered a speech polished within an inch of its life. "We're not just disrupting," he said, pausing like a stage actor hungry for applause. "We're defining." Polite laughter. Graham stepped up next, fingers twitching, teeth bright with adrenaline. "We've been building something exceptional, and today we show you why we're the ones to bet on." He clicked the presentation remote. A slide appeared. A stylized dashboard mock-up. Big numbers. Exponential arrows. Smug, upward-facing arrows. Then he clicked the login button on the real demo environment. And the screen just sat there. The cursor spun for exactly 3 seconds, then glitched, then froze, Then the screen went black. Graham's smile didn't leave yet. He clicked again. The screen flickered once. A message appeared. Access key not found. The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the VCs leaned forward slightly, like a predator catching the scent of blood. Graham looked to the side of the room, where Jonah, poor, wide-eyed Jonah, was already typing frantically on a laptop. His face had gone sheet white. "Sir," he whispered, loud enough for the first row to hear the master access key. It was hardwired to the port in the northeast office. Graham blinked. Jonah continued, barely audible, "The port. It's physically bound. We moved the environment, but we didn't replicate the handshake. The fallback auth was never deployed." The CEO turned his head slowly toward Graham like he'd just caught him peeing in the investor's mimosas. Graham stammered, clicking again like he could brute force reality. Retrying authentication. "Please wait," someone in the back coughed. Another investor leaned over to whisper something into a colleague's ear. Phones came out, not for taking notes, but for pulling up funding history, exit clauses, competitor stats. Jonah tried to run a manual override from the dev environment. The system spit back a permissions error. User not authorized. Claire had removed all fallback paths. Weeks ago, one of the engineers, one of Claire's, sat in the annex with his headset on, watching the log stream silently reroute every authentication attempt into an empty packet loop. A self-contained dead end. The system wasn't broken. It was sealed. Marisol, in the break room, sipped her lukewarm coffee and watched Slack light up like a Christmas tree. At Demo Ops, urgent. Who owns root handshake permissions? At Infra Support. Wasn't that Claire's team? Exec Assist, someone call Claire. At Marketing, should we pause tweets? At CEO, get me a room. Now. Claire's phone buzzed once, then again, then 14 times. She didn't flip it over. Instead, she opened her laptop and watched the mirror logs roll in. CPU idle, traffic rerouted, no breaches, just silence. At 11:24 a.m., the first investor closed their folder and stood up. At 11:25, the second one followed, muttering, "I've seen enough." Graham was still standing at the front, sweating through his lavender button-down, trying to summon charm like it was a debugging tool. "We're just experiencing a minor integration hiccup. Happens with high-scale systems. We'll restart the environment." Jonah didn't look up from his laptop. His voice cracked. "It won't help, sir. The key is gone. It's not virtual, it's physical, and it's not here." CEO looked like he aged 5 years in 5 minutes. His jaw clenched. He turned to Graham and said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "You had one job." Claire paid for her cortado in cash, nodded at the barista, and walked out into the sun. The fire was burning, and she hadn't even touched a match. The room smelled like panic and stale Prosecco. One of the investors was tapping a Mont Blanc pen against their phone, slow and deliberate, each click a countdown. Another had already logged into LinkedIn, searching profiles. Possibly competitors, possibly exits. A third scrolled through the demo deck with a raised eyebrow and a half smirk that said, "We saw the peak. Now show us the fall." The CEO stood frozen at the front of the room, lips pressed so tight they looked stapled shut. His jaw was doing that twitchy thing Claire had seen once before, right before he fired the last head of product for strategic underperformance. Graham, now visibly sweating, whispered something to Jonah that sounded like, "Can we spoof it?" Jonah shook his head. "I don't even have SSH access. The handshake is hardware bound. There's no bypass." "Claire designed it that way. Fix it," Graham hissed. Jonah stared at him like a man being asked to reboot gravity. "We can't even find the housing." She took it. Upstairs, someone tried to run a backup demo from a pre-recorded deck. It crashed before it loaded, file path still pointing to a local drive that no longer existed. Another engineer opened the read-only environment Claire had left them. All cosmetic, no backend, like a showroom car with no engine under the hood. The CEO turned slowly, like he was afraid his own spine might betray him, and looked directly at Graham. It wasn't a glare. It was the kind of look people give when they realize the ticking noise under the floor wasn't the pipes. It was a bomb. Claire's phone buzzed again. Graham mobile, then CEO office. Then a new one, unknown number. She didn't touch it. She was sitting on a park bench 4 blocks away, legs crossed, sipping ginger tea from a thermos like she was early to a picnic no one else had been invited to. The sun was out. Her inbox was closed. Her team chat was open. She typed, "Lunch is on me. Annex at 12. Don't wait for me to start." One by one, the read receipts popped up. Alex responded first, "Copy that." Marisol wants faux. Kenny added, "I want 2 egg rolls and a framed photo of Graham crying." Claire smiled, soft and slow. Behind her, a small kid ran past with a kite shaped like a shark, and for a moment the wind picked up just enough to flip the edge of her coat. Beneath it, in the inner pocket, was a USB drive wrapped in electrical tape. The backup. The original code. The part they'd tried to copy, decorate, dumb down until it broke. She didn't plan to use it. She just liked knowing it was there. In the boardroom, the CEO finally stepped away from the table and addressed the investors directly. "We'll be issuing a full technical postmortem and rescheduling the live demo with improved redundancies." He glanced sideways at Graham, then corrected himself, "assuming our infrastructure partner can be realigned appropriately." The tallest investor simply stood. "We've seen enough." That was it. No yelling, no shattering glass. Just silence, a verdict written in stares and quietly zipped briefcases. The kind of silence that costs millions. Claire stood from her bench and tucked the thermos into her bag. Her phone buzzed again. CEO office. She flipped the screen face down on the bench and kept walking. She didn't need to hear the apology. She was the apology, the ghost in the server, the missing key. The quiet revenge they could never admit aloud, because to name it would be to acknowledge just how badly they'd underestimated the woman they tried to erase with a real estate shuffle and a few Instagram filters. And she hadn't raised her voice once. The Monday after the implosion, Claire's LinkedIn headline changed. No announcement, no humble brag, just a clean, surgical update that radiated quiet power. Head of data, co-founder Oren Analytics, no buzzwords, no hashtags, just the truth. Inside the company she left behind, now hemorrhaging investor interest, and spinning up a PR patch that smelled like scorched earth and cheap cologne, panic had shifted into the next stage. Denial with a PowerPoint deck. HR was told to rebuild morale. Marketing pivoted to a new messaging campaign about learning through bold experimentation. Graham was taking time off for personal wellness. But in Slack DMs, inboxes, and group chats, narrative had already calcified. Claire didn't just leave. She left the map on fire behind her. Oren Analytics wasn't just a competitor. It was the same tech, reforged, smarter, stripped of the bloat, the noise, the glitter-thirsty middlemen who thought platforms were accessories. It had the same bones, hers, but now they were wrapped in capital, autonomy, and a founding team made entirely of people who knew the code wasn't the product. The people were her old team. Hadn't followed her. Not officially. Not yet. But Marisol had lunch with her last week. Kenny had started committing open source code to one of Oren's GitHub side repos, just on weekends. Alex had turned in his resignation the Friday after demo day. And Taryn, her Instagram bio now just said, marketing advisor. Manifesting my next chapter, seedling sparkles back in the office Claire once called home. Maintenance request had finally made its way up the chain. Apparently, during the demo week scramble, someone had filed a low-priority ticket labeled unclaimed network device behind Northeast Port. Facilities didn't know what to do with it, so they called IT, who called security, who sent a kid named Brandon, 20 years old, earbuds in, just trying to make rent, to retrieve the box. Brandon arrived with a dolly and a label maker. He scanned the tagless, dented gray housing unit like it might blink back at him. One of the cables sparked faintly as he lifted it, like it didn't want to go. He shrugged, slapped on a barcode sticker that read Unknown Legacy, and wheeled it to the equipment vault. Top shelf. Forgotten in less than a week. No one asked where it came from. No one remembered how critical it had once been. Except Graham, suspended, isolated, probably still refreshing his inbox for a reply that would never come. Except the CEO, now stumbling through analyst calls, explaining how their authentication architecture was evolving rapidly. Except Claire, who, at that very moment, sat in a sunlit office with real plants and a working espresso machine, sketching out a new data lineage model on a touchscreen wall with a dry erase stylus and a smirk. There was no revenge memo. No expose. A LinkedIn blog post titled What I Learned After Getting Screwed. There didn't need to be. The story told itself. Underestimate the quiet ones, and you won't hear the engine until it's already passed you by. Claire closed her laptop, stood up, and stretched. Her new COO poked his head in, grinning. Investor kickoff in 10. Want me to order lunch? She nodded. Tie. Behind her, the Oren logo shimmered on the glass. Same code. Same team. New rules. No one would ever call her background support again. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch flicking chaos alive. Your ex boss is shaking in their loafers.